we're getting some breaking news coming into the situation right now from about Michael Jackson, the king of pop, who's 50 years old. Let's go to Deborah Farrick. She's working the story for us. What are we picking up, Deb?
Well, Wolf, here's what we can tell you. This is what's being reported by KTLA. Apparently, Michael Jackson suffered cardiac arrest this afternoon.
CNN sources are now saying, multiple sources, that Michael Jackson is in a coma at UCLA Medical Center, suffered from cardiac arrest, and is now in a coma. And we're just getting this in right now, and it's very, very sad news. Jim Moret, and to all of our viewers, both the Los Angeles Times and CBS News are both now reporting that Michael Jackson has died.
It was a very interesting story for me, Jim, to dig into, because I will say that I have been the subject of Jackson fans' anger for many, many years in my previous roles editing various publications. And I recall distinctively being interviewed on the Nancy Grace program. And I dare call Michael Jackson during the Conrad Murray trial a drug addict. And my phone that was on the desk in front of me proceeded to beep like the July 4 fireworks over New York City. And I was particularly, these were vicious comments that were being made about me because Jackson believers, the Jackson establishment, as I like to call them, tend not to believe anything that paints Michael Jackson in a negative light. So in the wake of Leaving Neverland, I believed it was particularly important, with a documentary that outright accused Michael Jackson with two new accusers, that I undertake a thorough investigation in order to try and determine whether the pop idol that I grew up following was indeed someone who, as one lawyer described, capable of running this international child sex trafficking ring.
That's what struck me, is that you don't just make accusations. You back your stories up with multitude of interviews. I mean, even and court records. So these are not just accusations. These are statements based in fact.
Yeah, and I would like to point out that it's easy for people like the Jackson establishment to criticize my work and just say, well, he's a tabloid journalist and he's been connected to this person and this person and this person. But this is really a fair and objective portrayal of the Michael Jackson scenario. In fact, I raised questions about the legitimacy of James Shafshock, one of the individuals making allegations, and Wade Robson, as to whether or not they were capable of recounting the abuse so many years after it allegedly took place. So I would like to think that I put together a very fair and balanced book. Others will be the judge of that. But the role of a journalist is to dig in and try and find information that you go in with a nonpartisan agenda. So you don't know what you're going to find. And that was the most enthralling part for me about the Michael Jackson book, was having been a fan, having covered the allegations, here was an opportunity for me to dig in and try and establish the veracity or lack thereof behind a lot of the claims.
You mentioned the one person who accused him of abuse. You had his statement examined by his lie detector test, rather, examined by a professional. Would you call him like a voice control?
So this is a technique that is used by law enforcement to detect stress within one person's voice. So it determines whether someone is embellishing, whether someone is nervous. It's akin to a lie detector test. And, for want of a way of describing it in technical terms, essentially you feed the video into the machine and it comes back with a reading and detects whether or not there is potential deception. Now, I emphasize potential deception, This is not admissible in a court of law, and it doesn't mean that Wade Robson or the other accuser are not telling the truth. But what it does do is provide some context to the allegations in Leaving Neverland. You've got to understand Leaving Neverland was a project that was partisan. It went in with a pre-intended agenda by virtue of the fact that they had two of these survivors of Michael Jackson. So to that end, I think the contrast of the Deceptech technology that we used to analyze their statements does provide interesting context in that it does say that elements of the story was embellished.
And also, you take Jackson's own words. Matter of fact, I noticed in the book you reproduce pages of his diary.
Yes.
And so, I mean, so people who say, "Hey, you're doing a hatchet job on him," and that really is kind of a questionable comment itself, because you've got Jackson's own writings saying this is what he believes people are trying to kill him.
That's right. He had distrust of those around him. He talks about Conrad Murray and needing him. He talks about wanting to be the greatest performer ever. He talks about people wanting to kill him. These are his own handwritings that were filed as part of the Conrad Murray civil litigation to do with AEG Live, I believe. And people have discounted these documents. These were filed in a court of law. So there's no disputing the authenticity of the Jackson diary. But it certainly paints a disturbing portrait of a man who, in his final years, was very, very challenged emotionally, psychologically, and distrusting of everyone around him.
It seems like every time he was confronted with something which did not fit his Peter Pan-like view of the world, he started to cry. When one of the parents did not want their children spending time with him, he started to cry. He started to get hysterical. When confronted with accusations, he started to cry. That seemed to be a mode of operation with him, didn't it?
Look, I think it would be fair to characterize Michael Jackson as someone who didn't understand the limitations or boundaries of right or wrong. Now, let's understand, he was never convicted in a court of law of any criminal charges related to child sex or pedophilia. But what I can safely say, and I write about this in the opening to the book, is that he just didn't know right from wrong, right? He was on video, as I have watched and many others have watched, playing with children in a bedroom, and the level of discourse between them was inappropriate. It should never have been said, and their action should never have really been taking place in the first instance. And he was favouring these children over his own children who were in another room. His nanny was outside. It was just inappropriate behaviour. And you've got to look at it and say, a person of his age, someone of his intellect and talent, simply knows right from wrong. And Michael Jackson, that was his biggest fatal flaw.
Very true. And you mentioned also, I mean, his life, let's face it, he did not have the easiest of growing up with his father. But it seemed like his life really took a left turn when he suffered his injury, as you write, in January, I believe in 1980.
The Pepsi commercial, yeah.
The Pepsi commercial, yeah.
There's no doubt that as a result of the Pepsi commercial, Michael Jackson became dependent upon various drugs. Those drugs were painkillers, and from that moment on, for nearly 3 decades, he was using and abusing these drugs. And quite frankly, I don't believe he was able to stand perpendicular towards the end as he was preparing for This Is It, if it was not for the drugs that he was being administered every night at his Holmby Hills home. Ultimately, he didn't know, again, right from wrong. An adult who was addicted to drugs was unable to make the determination about the quantities or whether or not to even use these drugs. But that strikes at the very core of a much larger issue, and that is the enablers around him. The people like Dr. Conrad Murray, who willfully and wrongfully administered these drugs with reckless abandon for medical conditions because they were facing demands from an icon like Michael Jackson.
It reminded me a lot of the same stories that we heard, basically the same stories that we heard with Elvis Presley and Dr. Nicopolis. You know,
Yeah, and let's not forget Michael Jackson married Lisa Marie Presley, and there are a lot of similarities between Elvis's life and that of Michael Jackson's. And I think that's symbolic of the larger Hollywood community, right? That people all of a sudden get this high wealth due to their success, and there's very little controls around them to limit them from making poor decisions. And I think everyone would suggest that Elvis made poor decisions, and I think it's unambiguous. Michael Jackson made poor decisions too.
it's like John Belushi.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
another thing that struck me is that you mentioned this is at the final tour that he signed up for. He didn't realize he was signing up for 50 shows. He thought it was going to be 10.
yes.
And I'm not sure he was even physically able to do 10 at that point. But, you know, from reading your book, it would seem no way he could do 50.
Oh, I don't think he could have done 10 shows. I don't think he could have done 50 shows. But he was in dire financial straits, and he was being controlled almost by a puppeteer that tried to re-energize his career, because they realized if they could get Michael Jackson on stage in any capacity, save for a performance of like Whitney Houston, who lost her voice and was widely panned around the world for attempting to tour. If you could get Michael Jackson on the stage performing at even 60, 70% capacity, you would have had 50 sold out shows. And you know what that means for the promoter? Cash.
Yeah. And really, unfortunately, that's what happens with a lot of stars. They become cash cows for the promoters. Just get them on stage any way you can.
Yep.
You know, we recently saw that with the movie Rocket Man. You know,
Yeah.
So let me ask you now. I don't mean to switch gears on you here, but I want to talk a little bit about Royals at War also.
Sure.
Now, this is not just a story of Harry and Meghan, but it's really, I mean, this is a family which you must have had. How easy was it getting records for the royal family?
I mean, this was probably one of the more difficult books to write. And though the book talks about Harry and Meghan's split, it's told about Harry and Meghan's split from the House of Windsor. It's told through the history of the royal family, which I think is critical to understand why this was such a monumental decision from Harry and Meghan to abdicate from the family, not since King Edward in 1936 had the royals faced such a constitutional crisis. So putting it into that perspective, and also juxtaposing who Harry is, who Meghan Markle is, compared to who Prince William is, and compared to whom Kate Middleton is, and the procedures and protocols and the royal history, the deep history of the monarchy, was critically important to understanding the magnitude of the decision that these two people made.
That's what I was thinking. Is that, you know, I was a child of older parents, and so I heard a lot of stories. My mom loved King Edward, so I heard a lot of stories about him and the American woman that he fell in love with, and I just draw the same conclusion or same parallels to Harry and Meghan. You know, they're both Americans. They're both commoners. An actress marrying a royal. That's something you see maybe on a Hallmark movie channel, but not in real life, you know. So I can imagine that sent shockwaves.
Well, the one disparity between Wallis Simpson and Meghan Markle is her race. I mean, she's mixed race, and at a time when the country is divided by race, you have to look at her time as a member of the royal family, put it into context with the British media, and understand that there was a subtext of racism about the coverage. And I think that was the catalyst for Harry to agree with Meghan that they needed to get out of the royal family. Here was Harry who lost his mother and blamed the British tabloids for its role in her ultimate death in 1997. The royals have never had a great relationship with the British media. In fact, I would describe it as probably a 1 out of 10. And here he was with his new wife, obviously besotted by her, his soulmate, and there was nothing he could do to fight back against this constant barrage of negative publicity, because it's unbecoming of a royal to deal with the media. And we're seeing that now played out in a court case that Meghan has taken up against the Daily Mail newspaper, in which she's flat out said that the House of Windsor gagged her. They told her not to comment. And that's inconsistent with who Meghan Markle has been for her entire life.
Yeah, is there some? This is being taped on July 22nd. Isn't there something coming up on Friday, July 24th? That has bearing.
I'm not sure.
I think there's a trial coming up or something like that.
Right.
You know, and but yes, I mean, I can see where Harry blames the media, because let's face at least the tabloid media, because the tabloid media, were chasing his mother supposedly when the car crashed.
Well, yes and no. I mean, look, that's the popular conception.
Right.
But the reality of the matter is the paparazzos that were following the car in the Diana accident were driving motorcycles that were like 50cc, and the car was traveling at speeds of 300 kilometers per hour. They weren't anywhere near the tunnel.
Wasn't the driver drinking also?
The driver was drunk, blind drunk.
Yeah.
And they weren't wearing seatbelts. There were 4 people in that car. 1 person survived. Trevor Rees-Jones, the bodyguard. Guess what? He was wearing a seatbelt. So having studied the Diana story as well, because I released a book last year, or maybe 2 years ago now, called Diana Case Solved, I don't put the media... Look, I certainly think the media's ravenous appetite for Diana complicated things, but in terms of the actual accident and the causation of the accident, the media had nothing to do with that. There was another car that entered into the tunnel, clipped the Mercedes-Benz, sent the Mercedes-Benz careering into the air. It hit a concrete pylon, came back down, and careered into the 13th pylon inside the tunnel, causing the fatal accident. It was only minutes thereafter that the media was able to catch up to the actual tunnel. So Harry may blame the media, and I certainly subscribe to the theory that the media had this ravenous appetite for Diana content. And Charles Spencer, her brother, criticised the media for that. And yes, she wasn't protected by the royal family, just like Meghan Markle wasn't. And I think that is why Harry was able to so easily walk away from the royal family, because he didn't want to see a repeat of what happened to his mother, happened to his wife, and his newborn Archie.
How do you think they view Meghan now in the royal family?
Look, I think that they were very excited at the prospect of having someone of her stature from Hollywood, someone who was mixed race, and someone who had a profile, because for the House of Windsor, ever since Diana's death, they have spent a tremendous amount of work to rebuild their public image. Prince Charles has gone from being the most hated monarch or member of the monarchy to one of the most popular, which is unheard of to think, considering the barrage of criticism they received soon after Diana's death. So Meghan represented an opportunity to modernise the monarchy, and the Queen went out of her way to try and assimilate her into the family. She made a special appearance with her very soon after Harry announced that they were dating. She lent her diamond jewels. She gave her the pick of jewelry on the wedding day. But what the Queen and Kate and others did to mitigate what was happening behind the scenes simply wasn't enough. They called her Princess Pushy and the Divisive Duchess for a reason. She was demanding on household staff. 5 staff were turned over within months of their marriage because apparently she was too demanding. Now, this comes back to, her desire to want to do good and speak out for various causes. And I don't think she can be criticized for that. This is someone who has always had that activism blood running through her veins. And though it might be unbecoming as a member of the royal family to do that, their split from the House of Windsor allows them to do that now.
And they're only an hour outside of London, correct? Or are they moving? They're not moving to America.
They're in California right now.
They're in California right now.
Los Angeles. And I think that also raises, this is a really perplexing story on so many levels because, they said in their statement that they wanted to quit to avoid the limelight. Well, the limelight doesn't shine any brighter than it does in Hollywood.
Los Angeles,
yeah. And they've already made a series of complaints to the LAPD about drones flying over their estate, which rightfully so. Drones shouldn't be flying over their estate. That's against the law in California under anti-paparazzi laws. But again, be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you sign up for. And Harry and Meghan must realize that in LA, in a post-COVID world, they are going to be the most hounded and hunted celebrities on the streets of Los Angeles.
Exactly. Well, Dylan, I tell you what, this has been a fascinating time. The 2 books are one is called Royals at War. The other one is called Bad. And that's the story of Michael Jackson. I'm never going to say it's a bad book because it's a book called Bad. And I urge everyone to pick them up at your bookstore or at any brick and mortar store or online at Amazon.com. Dylan, again, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. And I think it's very important that people, if they do get a chance and are interested in buying the book, to go to brick and mortar stores to help those stores out that have been horribly impacted by COVID. So go to the brick and mortar stores. If not, you can find them online.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.